You are listening to the Ibn Abi Umar podcast. This is your host, Umar Osman. Hey everyone, I'm joined by Mohammed Faris here from the Productive Muslim Company. Mashallah, our return guest here.
Happy to be back.
Was on a couple of months ago. We talked about faith-based professional development. And one of the topics that we touched on in that last episode was the idea of Barakah culture versus hustle culture. And in that time, Mohammed, you've been refining that concept, doing more research on that concept. And so we thought that it'd be good to get back together and go into a little bit more detail just on that particular topic.
Awesome. All right. Bismillah. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu Rasulillah. Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. Just keep thinking about it. And sometimes when you think of a topic long enough, you kind of start seeing connections and kind of see how it makes sense or doesn't make sense in some ways. And plus testing it out on the ground. So we actually did some of the work where we deliver this content to companies or to organizations, and they're like, and in the resistance you get, they're like, wait a second, this whole thing sounds a bit, it's goes against the normal conventional corporate training stuff. Well,
actually, let's pause there for a second because we've talked about this a lot.
Yes.
But I don't know that the audience might be familiar. So you've done a number of corporate trainings, like traditional, straight up, like at a non-religious organization, straight corporate training where they want productivity or whatever the case may be. But you've done it in Muslim countries where I guess the people are Muslim, but the company still has an expectation of a secular delivery. So explain that. What actually has been the resistance and even the comments that you get before you go in?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is we're talking about productivity, which is a very human science, and you can bring in psychology, you can bring in spirituality, you can bring in all the factors that impact this human being. So I come in, and of course they know Productive Muslim, they know that what I do, and a lot of times either the HR or the CEO or the VP is interested in this topic, and like, all right, present to our audience. And then when I first presented, especially the first sessions, they freak out. Like they're like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like Allah and
like this is too religious for our workplace.
Exactly. And shaitan, like, what are you talking? Like, this is work. I'm like, okay, so are you saying this work does not, like, those factors don't come into the work? Like, well, yeah, it does. And some of them are very practicing. Some of them they, it's not a judgment on spirituality on a personal level. It's just making that connection in a professional setting where they really struggled. But the like, we had a situation in Turkey with one company where I did the workshop for, and literally the CEO was pretty upset. After the first session, he was really genuinely upset. And he said, no, don't bring spirituality or tone it down a little bit. This is not what I expected. I expected some more productivity, like, hacks and time management stuff. What are you bringing spirituality?
How to use timers.
Exactly. How do you, and I told him, listen, wait 3 days. Let's finish this workshop. And by the end of the third day, if this does not make sense and if this does not appeal to you, I'm happy to even refund you the whole training workshop. Like, I'm putting my reputation and my financial well-being on the line here, because they're like, just wait 3 days and see how even your employees react to this. So by the third day, he came up and said, all right, solid. He left me an awesome LinkedIn sort of recommendation and said, this is one of the best trainings I've attended. I've attended many trainings, corporate training before, because it made sense. It connected to my core of my being, which is my soul. So I think this whole idea, and of course we live in this whole dichotomy of separating spirituality from the work,
compartmentalizing
it really is impacted. But once you make that connection, it's like you open up a whole different way of
thinking.
So
what in the workshop was it that flipped that switch with him?
Good question. I think when he saw the whole sort of where we're going with this, we normally start the workshop by understanding, who are you? We asked, like, who are you? And they're like, they like struggle with the whole thing. And we used Dr. Abdullah Rothman's, we spoke about this earlier, Dr. Abdullah Rothman's sort of model of the soul. There's great research by Dr. Abdullah Rothman, where he talks about how Islam views human being. A lot of times, example.
And I'll add the link in the show notes for people that want that.
And basically, we use that to say, well, this is who you are. This is the model of that person, the soul. Now, how to use that model to talk about performance, productivity, time management, focus management, being a better version of yourself. And it starts seeing the link between the stuff that they do in the masjid at home and performance and productivity and getting things done. And like, okay, this is I can see where this is going, but it's a hard pill to swallow, and it takes a lot of, I'll say, a lot of courage, and a lot of almost starting to doubt, and realize maybe I don't know what I don't know, and I need to learn more and figure out and make that connection. So what I think the switch happens when when I start presenting research on peak performance. Let's say research on time management, or research on focus management, or research on sleep, or research on nutrition, and I link it to concepts such as Barakah and spirituality and Sunnah. And like, okay, now they're seeing almost like part of it feels a bit comfortable. This is research backed, but then they can also make that leap of faith for those things that require that leap of faith. We talk about Barakah culture and stuff like that. So it takes a while to simmer, but it's an important shock to the system to have, because for too long we've been taught this one model of corporate training, which is,
and they've essentially been told, like, your religion, you check it at the door.
Boom. Exactly.
And then you're coming in and saying you need to actually harness your faith,
yes,
to be
a
the
better
best version of yourself at work.
Absolutely. I was at a large multinational institution, and the ombudsman, so the head of integrity, basically, he said the number one issue we have in this organization, which is causing all those conflicts, and he said, is hasad. I'm like, wait, say what? Like, it's hasad. Like, what do you mean hasad? Like, and I told, how do you solve hasad? It's not something that you can get a corporate trainer. Let's talk about hasad, guys, right? And let's deal with envy. Even envy, the word envy sounds very, how do you bring training material and tools to deal with hasad?
Well, and it's a hard sell too. Like, if you're going into a workplace, it's one thing if you're in an Islamic organization, but you're going into a workplace, they're saying, okay, our problems are that we're over budget, we're overdue on our timelines, we're understaffed, we're overworked, and now you want to talk about what?
Seriously, the way I now explain to corporates, I'm like, there's 3 sets of skills you need for employees. Number 1, you need technical skills, which we all get from college and training and all the stuff we do. Soft skills, which we know it's abundant, leadership and and competencies, like interpersonal, emotional intelligence and stuff. But there's 3rd set of skills, which is you don't talk about, which is hard skills. Really, how to deal with basically your heart and your nafs, things like compassion, things like dealing with hasad, jealousy, dealing with egos. God, I mean, office politics.
It's all ego driven.
It's all ego driven. How do you deal with that? And those things, you can talk about soft skills you can talk about emotional intelligence all you want, and this is where things like spiritual intelligence comes in, because you need that sort of that faith system. How do you teach amana to people? The idea of amana,
instilling a sense of responsibility and trust.
Yeah, how do you teach that, right? You can talk about soft skills of amana, technical skills of amana. It's linked to spirituality, ethics, believing in a hereafter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for me, a lot of, if we take like the topic of ego, right? There's very good books that are written from a secular perspective on the idea of ego and its negative consequences. But there's no equalizer in the sense that either you just are able to buy into it and see the effect of it or see the benefit of it, of like subduing your ego. But the challenge that society constantly rewards being egotistical, right? So people that toot their own horn tend to move up. And so there has to be some equalizing mechanism that makes you say, like, I'm going to sacrifice that benefit that I get. And for me, it's hard to come up with any accountability mechanism other than the hereafter, because unless you're focused on what benefits me or is going to hurt me in the hereafter, it's a real challenge to actually make yourself act in that in that way where you're subduing your nafs even though you might get success.
Absolutely. And an interesting thing there, like Dr. Ali Gumzawi, he did a research paper on moral leadership, the role of religion in moral leadership development. And he talks about the fact that there's 3 factors that people of faith have, which gives them...
Who's this author again?
Dr. Ali Gumzawi. And he wrote a research paper on and maybe you can send the link to the paper as well, on the 3 factors that impact a person's leadership when they're from a faith perspective. One is believing God. The fact you believe in a God, that's by itself, you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that by itself makes you think differently. If you don't believe in Allah, or you actively choose not to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are certain implications on that. Second, believe in hereafter, the fact there's a life after death, that also changes how you perceive things, how you value things. And third is believing in some kind of sacred scriptures, which tells you how to live your life, right? The Quran and Sunnah in our case, there's those choices we make. So this is where we brought the idea of, we developed the Barakah culture as part of our refinement of ideas was, what are the mindsets, what are the values, what are the rituals that are driven by believing in Allah, believing hereafter, and believing in scripture, which actually change the way you perceive things, change the way you act, change the way you behave, change the decisions, the decision criteria you make. And I think, and we tend to discount that. We tend to discount that heavily, or we don't see the linkage. And I think this is our challenge. And part of it, because even as people of faith, people of religion, of training, of khatibs and imams, sometimes we've kind of kept that within the context of, religious teachings, spiritual teachings, and not how do you make it relevant to daily life, to personal life, professional life. That's the challenge as well.
Yeah, I think, part of it is like the cliche thing has always been intention.
Yep.
That as long as your intention is supporting your family and earning a halal living, et cetera, that even your work then is ibadah or worship, yep. Right? And like, obviously we don't disagree with that, but it's also a very simplistic way of looking at it. And if you're spending that much time working, it's not always going to be just for supporting your family. You need to be able to get some self-satisfaction, your own sense of growth, your own actualization of your potential in some cases as well, that I have something to contribute. And I think the Barakah culture mindset is a way to almost accelerate that beyond just, I have an intention, so I'm getting rewarded. It's actually, is this an arena for me to apply my faith?
Yeah. And if you remember the book by the late Nabil Azami on 11 qualities that change the world, with Prophet Muhammad, in his book, he quotes this whole hierarchy of intentions. It's not just having intentions, like what level. It starts off like the basic level intentions, doing something purely for worldly gain or financial gain. And then so we can upgrade that intention to, for example, doing something for honor, reputation, and fame. And then you upgrade that intention of actually just a feel-good factor. You don't care about the honor, reputation, fame. You don't care about the financial gain, but you're doing it for the feel-good factor. But then you can upgrade that intention and talk about not just feel-good factor. Now you can move up to, you call spiritual contentment, meaning that you feel spiritually good about it. This is what kind of self-actualization, maybe Maslow's theory, like the idea of like I feel good about it. Almost like a spiritual. This is my life purpose. The meaning and purpose comes through, because that's not the highest level. And then you can go up there and say, oh, I'm doing this to gain paradise and avoid hellfire. And again, because I'm doing it might not be spiritual contentment, there might be no feel-good factor, it might not be honor, reputation, fame, or financial world gain, but I'm doing this purely for gaining paradise and avoiding hellfire. But he said, even then, there's something that's higher than that, and that's doing something purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, which is tough, which is really high. So even something as again, we've kind of heard this narrative many times, but have good intentions and you'll be fine, and you're earning the living.
So how do you apply that noble intention to someone that's an accountant, or a software coder, or just these regular just the corporate jobs that a lot of us fill? How do you implement that?
So one is more, okay, I'll answer the more tactical and then more philosophical. The tactical one, there's a South African company who asked me to do a retreat for them and just talk about Barakah culture. They're a very young startup doing very well financially. And the CTO, someone who's like, Ahmed, I look at code every single day. Like, that's my job. How on earth am I supposed to have the intention of achieving God's pleasure looking at code? Right?
Yeah, I'm finding errant semicolons and removing them to make the code compile.
Exactly. It's like, oh. So I just threw it out there, told him, okay, which of the 99 names of Allah you love the most? He goes, I love the word Al-Jamil, right? The most beautiful. I said, okay, is there such thing as beautiful code? And his eyes lit up. He goes, yeah. I was like, all right. Is there a way for you to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that perspective that you are almost like worshiping and asking Allah's acceptance of the work through the work of beautiful code? And it's almost like something just unlocked for me, because I can see that connection. Now, you can only run with that so far. The more philosophical perspective is asking yourself kind of like, what am I doing in this world that needs, what's the body of work, or the body of your life, if you're to compile your life?
Because the traditional narrative really is more, I'm stuck in my cubicle, how do I get out? That's I would say the thinking of most people is, I feel like I'm wasting my life away, and much less like using this as a means of
spiritual development.
Yeah,
imagine seeing. So it was also one of the tactical levels, seeing how can I use a spiritual development. But then the other approach is thinking more from perspective, how can I do something that seeks God's acceptance? Like, what would it mean for me to do something seeking God's acceptance? And that's one of the key criteria of hustle culture versus Barakah culture, where hustle culture is all about getting results or some kind of target, something, versus doing something seeking God's acceptance. And what does it look like? Imagine you writing a report, imagine writing a book, imagine doing something and you're actually seeing God accepted. Now you might think, wait a second, I'm doing this to make my boss happy. I'm doing this to make,
So is this as simple as applying the concept of doing things with ihsan, right? Like having excellence in everything that you do, or is this a step beyond just having ihsan in your work?
I feel it's almost like a step beyond where it's almost, okay, it's bringing that
because there's the concept of no matter what my job is, I do it with ihsan to fulfill that sunnah of giving something my best effort.
Yeah, it's almost like you bring that God consciousness, that taqwa, into everything you do, including your work, right? So for example, like, and that means bringing the intentions. That means bringing istikhara before doing something. That means, consciously, almost like consciously thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in those small actions. Could be before entering a meeting, could be leaving the meeting, how you react, checking your heart in the middle of a meeting. Hey, is my ego playing up or not? What's happening here? Being in a state of, just, it's almost like how you engage spiritually with the work and how you engage spiritually with your family, engage spiritually with people around you. That's where it becomes much more beyond as a checklist. Oh, I have good intentions. Check. I'm doing something with ihsan. Check. I'm doing, and I think that's where we kind of made things too simple to the point where Islam became almost meaningless to us, and there's no linkage with.
It's too ritualistic.
And too not practical, and we don't see that whole Barakah paradigm, which maybe we can talk about, like,
so maybe things like swallowing your anger.
Moving, yeah, and seeing that as a part of your spirit. For example, you might talk. Let's say your boss talks to you, right? And you see you're burning. All right, what's happening? Why am I burning? Oh, is it because I'm feeling that my rizq is attached to this person? Is it because I have this issue of ego with this person? Is it because what's happening here? And you almost like check yourself. Yes, they can be.
You're almost like using faith as a means of self accountability at all times. And why am I responding this way? Why am I reacting that way? And it's not just assessing my motivations, but then my resulting actions driven by my identity as a Muslim, as opposed to just reacting or responding on the spot without taking faith into account, because the two reactions might be very different.
Yes, and it's almost being aware of your psyche. For example, being conscious of, how they say, for example, if the thoughts that goes in your head, right? Some thoughts come from your nafs, some thoughts come from shaitan, some thoughts come from angels, some thoughts came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So that people talk about how do you, so you're there and you have this rage in you, right? Oh God, I'm annoyed. Or I was talking to somebody the other day, and she runs a business, and she was struggling with this idea that her competitor basically released the product before she did, right? So she got really annoyed. She goes, I was feeling it, and it's basically jealousy picked up. I thought, okay, so that's a trial right there. What's the normal things? Oh, you should, the normal coach will say, all right, you should, don't worry, leave it aside, do your own best, do your best work, ignore that. I told him, oh, you know what? This is perfect for spiritual development. Now, check your heart. You realize it's jealousy. How can you cure the jealousy? And she's like, oh no, don't go there. I'm like, yes, you're going to share their work. She's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, you got to share their work. Why? Because you're treating your heart. Because now this thing that came up, which is annoying, which is something that burns you, you're going to start sharing the work to treat your nafs, treat your heart, as they realize, no, I have this disease. I need to cure this disease. So she did that. She actually went ahead and she, basically said, hey, I'm so happy so-and-so released this product and really recommend you guys check it out. It's good stuff. Not passive aggressive, nothing, just like genuinely good stuff. Yeah. She emailed right afterwards, goes, wow, I feel so much lighter. And I feel like now I can focus on doing work that Allah accepts versus me trying to play catch up. Exactly, play catch up. So what could have been a situation of competition, of cutthroat competition, became a spiritual development. And that's when how you operate within Barakah culture versus the whole hustle culture. You gotta lose so I can win, and let's cut, scarcity mindset, which you spoke about in your podcast. That is where it comes in. So it's bringing that taqwa, bringing that mindfulness into these situations and seeing every moment as, wow, okay, now this is interesting. How am I reacting?
I think what's interesting is that a lot of these principles and concepts, the better corporate and secular trainings will actually implement and teach a lot of the same stuff. But I think the gap is in the implementation, because unless you have the larger purpose driving you, there's not a reason to implement it sometimes.
Yeah, and also the stories. The fact that we have the seerah, which is so helpful. Like, oh, I remember the seerah, this happening, so I'll do the same, right? Those stories that you grew up with, right? So it's like, how do you teach someone honesty and amana? You don't teach them by lecturing them. You teach them through stories. You teach them
show them how it was done.
How it's done, the values, right? This is why having these stories back of our mind really is helpful, because you can recall it on the spot, and it becomes easier for you to all right. And because you have faith and belief in it, and you believe that there is reward, there's barakah in you fulfilling those, acting upon those stories, that way it becomes much more easier to implement versus, oh yeah, I heard, so and so amazing trainer saying I should have more compassion. What does that mean? Right? It's like, how does it, like, okay, fine, great, go big compassion. But then I hear a hadith or I see a seerah of the Prophet ﷺ showing compassion to people of Taif, even though they were out to get him. All right, I could get it.
So when you teach these in the corporate setting, obviously you get that feedback immediately, but do you get follow-up comments maybe a couple of weeks later from maybe some attendees? What types of things have they noticed after trying to implement some of this?
Yeah, I think the big thing they notice is how more calm they are and less stressful they are, because they realize, okay, there's certain things that's within my control to focus on, and there are certain things I need to align myself with in terms of the natural laws of how things work out, but also recognizing the sort of Allah's permission and sort of Allah in this whole equation, and just being aware of it, being mindful of it, literally. And that's it. That there's a level of stress as usually goes down. People say,
so it's funny you mentioned this, because one of my first jobs out of college, I worked in a hospital, and I had a Muslim coworker as well. And so one day, one of our non-Muslim coworkers, he came up to me. He goes, I really admire you and this other guy. And I'm like, why? He's like, and it was a busy hospital. It was like primarily a surgery hospital. So there was a lot of just urgent, important, red alert, and I mean quite literally life or death types of things happening like all day long. So you're running around, you're in a high pressure situation. And he goes, I noticed that you two guys are just always chill. Mm-hmm. He goes, even when everyone else is like acting crazy and everything's like getting out of hand, like you two guys are always calm. Mm. And he goes, and I figured out, like, he goes, I think it's because you guys are Muslim.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. I'm like,
it's like, really? It's like, I didn't see that coming.
Cool. I'm like, maybe I'm going to maybe I can give him shahada or something. And I'm just like, he goes, yeah. And he goes, and I've been talking to my wife at home, and I've been telling her about Muslims and Islam. And I was just like, oh my God. I'm like, what's happening here? And so he just keeps going, and he goes, this really made like an impression on me and stuff. And he goes, so I went home and I asked my wife, like, what do you think about me taking on a second wife, like Muslims do? God. And I was just like, no, like, you missed the point, man. That's not where this, like, it just completely like turned in a different direction from what I was expecting. I was like, we went from like this calm character to like, maybe this guy's gonna take shahada, to like, I think I like this religion because I can have two wives. I was like, no.
Nope. Out of the question. And that's interesting. So, like I said, being and when you implement this, it's not something what you say, what you do is like living this Barakah culture. And I think one thing that we were at the retreat in Singapore last month, and Dr. Bilal Rothman joined us, and we came up with this term, which I think was fascinating, because again, I was trying to explain this many times. I wasn't sure how to explain it. They said, think of this in terms of paradigms. In a paradigm, like a Newtonian paradigm or an Einstein paradigm, within the paradigm, the set of laws that was created within that paradigm makes sense. But if you take that set of laws and apply it to the other paradigm, it does not make sense. So, right. Yeah. So think about a Dunya paradigm. So there's two paradigms. There's a Dunya paradigm, and then there is we call Barakah paradigm, Akhirah paradigm, Allah paradigm. There's something that's unseen. In the Dunya paradigm, there's certain laws, and you got to follow the laws. You got to eat so you can survive. You got to sleep so you can wake up. Right? These are basic Dunya paradigms. So you got to basic laws within this Dunya paradigm which you need to fulfill. And part of what we do with Barakah Muslim is to teach you the Dunya paradigm practical stuff, right? How to manage your focus, energy, and time within the Dunya paradigm. But, and there's a big but, which is don't forget the fact there is a Barakah paradigm. For example, how do I, if Dunya paradigm says you got to sleep 8 hours a night, otherwise you can't get up for otherwise you won't function, right? And then we think of Ramadan and even outside Ramadan, where it's like, okay, you probably sleep less than that, but you get up for what? You get up to pray tahajjud, you get up to pray fajr, you get up to pray. Now, within the Dunya
have to
paradigm, within the Dunya paradigm, that doesn't make sense. Because like, what are you doing? But then you forget this whole Barakah paradigm. And Allah's saying, I want you to get up and pray. Give up your sleep for worship. To basically, I want you to operate within the Barakah paradigm. I want you to be recognized and to sometimes operate within it, recognizing that some things are, the stuff within Dunya paradigm.
They're not explained by the Dunya
Exactly.
paradigm. So like the fact that you're sleeping significantly less, but still able to perform and be productive from a Dunya paradigm doesn't make any sense. It's like finances, right? Like even non-Muslim authors will say, well, if you donate money, you just somehow, the quote unquote, the universe will return it to you. And it's like, you'll acknowledge almost everything except God himself.
Yep.
Like it's...
And so once you start thinking from those perspectives, like, okay, now, and that's why we talk about the mindset, vows, and rituals. This is what the kind of the laws of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, the Sunnah, and the guidance to us is this is how the Barakah paradigm works. Literally, give us a cheat sheet.
Now here's the laws of...
Exactly.
Right.
You got to pray 5 times a day. You got to fast once a year. And if you go, this is like just the basic minimum, right? Now, if you go beyond that, well, guess what? The Barakah paradigm, works for you. Really.
You get more results.
You get more, rich works for you in this life and of course in the next. And I think once you start looking from that perspective, now it's like, okay, I got a decision to make. Dunya paradigm, decision making, I got to do the stuff, look at my options. Barakah paradigm, I got to pray istikhara. Oh, I need to, I gotta, basically work on, I have this issue with my heart, like it's like heart disease, right? Dunya paradigm, competition, Barakah paradigm, no, abundance mindset. Barakah paradigm.
I'll give you one example, which is a Dunya paradigm essentially is lay people off. And I think in a Barakah paradigm is very interesting. And I don't have like maybe a particular story that I can share. This is maybe more anecdotal, but I think there's instances of the fact that you are financially like, I don't want to say helping, but let's say you're keeping someone employed so they can provide for their family. There actually ends up being a sense of barakah in that. And that might be something that is helping your company or organization even without you realizing it. Like there's a hadith that one time someone came to Prophet ﷺ and he said that, my brother, he comes and he spends time with you and this and that. Well, meanwhile, I'm working and supporting him. And the Prophet told him that maybe your entire sustenance is only there because of your support for him. Like if you weren't supporting him, maybe you wouldn't get anything at all. But meanwhile, the Dunya paradigm is just cut.
And in the famous hadith, إِنَّمَا تُنْصَرُونَ تُرْزَقُونَ بِضُعَفَائِكُم, that you are given victory and you're given sustenance through the weak ones.
Yeah.
Through the weak ones. So you trying your best to maintain the jobs or to help them transition, to upskill them, something, whatever it is, and seeking the intention, that's where intention comes in, seeking the Dunya, the Barakah paradigm, seeking the Barakah, that is where you start opening this whole Barakah paradigm.
So it's almost like if you have a Barakah paradigm, you're looking at the people as these are families that we need to be supporting or whatever through keeping them gainfully employed. And through that, our overall business may actually increase beyond what we're able to project or think
based
about.
On cash flows and projections.
Based on our pivot tables and Excel spreadsheets.
Exactly.
But from the Dunya perspective, it's, hey, we have to cut X% of the labor force. Who cares?
Yeah. And the thing about it, again, so that's implications in terms of business, implications of professional. I mean, implications huge. And imagine you being able to so we are given the cheat sheet, literally. This is the cheat sheet of life, literally. The mindsets, the values, and rituals. The question for us is, how do you apply them? How do you practically apply them on a day-to-day level? And that's kind of where currently, I'll say this is where we are researching this, whether it's working with yourself or others, and just like figuring out what does this mean? How does it apply on a professional level, on a personal level, on a family level? And it's fascinating. Honestly, I feel like we have only scratched the surface, and there's a lot that needs to be done.
So one question that comes up, so okay, it sounds nice in theory, right, to operate from a Barakah paradigm versus the Dunya paradigm. But I think a key question is, how do you measure it? Because every business wants metrics. We're a data-driven society now. The Dunya paradigm, you can measure everything and see if you're on track. How do you quantify or measure the spiritual side of it? How do you even know that we got this result because of the Barakah element versus something else?
Yeah. So the first and foremost, we should have that certainty and yaqeen that nothing happens without Allah's permission. And that's that, like nothing happens. So everything is happening by Allah's permission. And when we see, so barakah is measured either by increase, some kind of there's a growth. That's natural. That's the meaning of barakah. Nama was ziyada. There's increase, but it's not any increase, right? Fir'aun had a lot of money. Qarun had a lot of money. It's increase that brings benefit. And ideally, spiritual benefit, meaning it gets you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you get that promotion, you just become a jerk, right? or you just increase that hurts you back.
I was going to say, I don't remember the ayah, but there's an ayah that's, I think the term used in the Quran is istidraj.
Yes.
That they're given the wealth almost as a lure to pull them away from Allah. Like they wanted the wealth.
More
so
injustice.
They're actually given more and more success in the dunya as a means to take them away as a punishment.
Yeah, so when the taken is like Qarun, he had everything. So he went out and suddenly boom, the earth just swallowed him. That was a huge fall for him. It's almost like you go higher so that the fall becomes more painful kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the idea here is that so barakah does mean increase. Also, oh mashallah, you got barakah in your family, barakah in your job, or barakah. There is an increase, but it's increase that brings benefit. It's not if it's increase that brings you more stress or turns you away from Allah or increase that makes you more unjust, then that's not barakah. So that's one way to measure it. Is this increase, this growth gets me closer to God, gets me closer to Allah, and is beneficial to myself, to my family, those around me, or is this causing more stress? And we see people who get promoted, move up, and have big businesses. They're like, oh my God, like why am I doing this?
So I know this is going maybe off topic a teeny bit, but I think one way to assess this is also this drives maybe personal decisions in terms of career. So there's this idea of, okay, well, if I take a promotion, if I take this new role, it's going to mean an increase, let's say, in hours at work. It might mean that I'm traveling more, so now I'm away from my family. So these, I think, are things that people struggle with in the sense of, do I take this and make a sacrifice on the family side, or do I maybe take a step back and suffer in a sense professionally to increase the barakah side of it? How do you navigate those? Because that's something that I've done. I mean, I've faced that decision myself, right? Of do I continue moving up if it means that I'm on the road Monday to Thursday every week, or do I take a step back and be home?
And this is where it comes down to that intention. For example, if you are, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz or Salahuddin Ayyubi, who said to basically told his family, right, I'm now the new Khalifa, so I won't see you for a while, basically. So the intention was clear that he's like, I have this big role, which is to fulfill almost like my purpose on life, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this will mean taking time away from my family, from my children. Literally, Prophet ﷺ told Khadija, "Mada ahad an-nawm ya Khadija," the time of sleep has ended. Umar Abdul Aziz, when he became Khalifa, he told his wife Fatima, I'm now the Khalifa, don't expect me to be around as much, basically, because now I've got this responsibility. But the intention is what? The intention there, they have to fulfill a bigger mission, which is fulfilling their, almost like a huge purpose and role in life. Most of us, when it comes to these promotions or these things that require a lot of traveling, a lot of jobs, what's the intention? Is perhaps the financial worldly gain, which again, nothing wrong with that intention, but as long as we're clear, that's the intention. And the question for us, all right, let's do a cost benefit. Is that increase of X number of dollars per year worth me losing this much of time and the traveling and the headache and the stress and the health?
And I think one thing from the barakah point of view is that one of the things that's a source of barakah is good relations with your family. And I think in this case, maybe, so taking the example of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, is the family can be supportive and on board with the sacrifice because we're all aligned as to the purpose of this sacrifice. Whereas I think maybe sometimes with the other stuff, it's, no, we're not in alignment because, okay, cool, you get this job and let's say you make an extra X amount of money a year. If that's not really affecting our lifestyle or our kids, maybe the family is not on board, and then that's what causes a conflict. There's a book, How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen, and he talks about that at the end of their life, a lot of CEOs or these really high-performing executives, they say that one of their biggest regrets is, I don't have a relationship with my kids, or I only see my grandkids twice a year. And it's because I sacrificed for my shareholders in my company, and now they're seriously asking themselves, was it worth it or not?
Yeah. And that's why and it's not a call to people like, all right, sit back, don't move up, don't have ambition, it's a call that if you're gonna be ambitious and you're going to have a life purpose.
It has to be
Purposeful, intentional. It's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's for the akhir. Like, this has to be worth, and like I said, alignment. Like, everyone's aligned. For example, very famous.
And by the way, I've seen situations where someone is ambitious and progressing in Islamic work, right? Like, quote unquote dawah work and serving the community,
but the family is
but they still burn their family in the process. So it's like, well, what was the point?
There's a guy called Abdurrahman al-Samilt. He's a Kuwaiti a man who's a doctor, and he made his mission to do da'wah in Africa, right? And one thing that I'm amazed, not him, amazed his wife and kids, where literally the wife, says, all right, I'm coming with you, and the kids are coming with you, and literally spend years in random villages in Africa around. In fact, there's a map of showing just the number of villages have converted to Islam through his effort. And it wasn't him alone. It was him, his wife. Again, the alignment, the whole family was aligned to this is the life purpose, and we're ready to make sacrifices for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that they spent literally years in that. And he passed away a few years back. But it was that alignment. Now, if he was going alone and sacrificing his family, or if there was no alignment, or if the intention was not there, wasn't for the right reasons.
Or maybe even if he's driven, but his family is opposed to it.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you start having those conversations, like, and this is where Barakah culture comes in, because then when you start operating, yes, it did not make financial sense to him to be in Africa. And he's a doctor. His wife came from a very well-off family. Like, why would you do that? Like, you can live a very comfortable, happy life in Kuwait and do well. He said, nope, I want to do, this is what I feel like it's my need to be. And this is where the intention came in, and that, again, the hierarchy of intentions came in. That they really did it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, and so that's where it's not as simple as, oh, work-life balance, or don't get a promotion, or try not to sit back and say no. It's about thinking, have ambitious for the right reasons, but at the same time be recognizing of the Barakah culture.
And I think we've seen examples at the other end too, where even if people are ambitious, if they don't have the right process in terms of, even let's say things like family, from the Barakah mindset, we understand that they're not going to end up getting the results that they thought that they would. And so even though they might say, okay, I'm making the necessary sacrifice, I'm going all in, it might not be as fruitful as they thought that it was going to be, because they didn't take care of the elements that bring them the barakah. Yeah.
And this is where something I said, people, even within Islamic work, like I said, they can, if the values are not there, if the intention is not there, if the rituals are not there. I mean, I was talking to an investment banker, a Muslim investment banker. She runs a multi-million-dollar Islamic fund to invest halal investments on behalf of Muslim investors. You can't get more halal than that. And the problem with, like, I told her, do you pray istikhara before making investment decision? She's like, no. I'm like, you're investing billions.
I look at my pivot table.
Exactly. I'm like, you're investing millions of dollars on behalf of Muslim investors, right? And you're making decisions every day. I'm like, not praying istikhara on your decisions. I mean, where's the disconnect? It's like, I've just never thought of it. I read it never. So again, the dunya paradigm is like something we think within that table, and not
that idea even of the istikhara there, that is driven by, if you understand that you have an amana to your investors, and doing things with ihsan, like those Islamic principles, then will force you to take those extra steps
to track barakah.
Because from the dunya paradigm, all you need to do is you need to validate your Excel spreadsheets, you need to validate your projections, validate that you've done your due diligence and background research. As long as you check those boxes, you're pretty much in the clear. But from the Barakah mindset, that's not enough.
That's not enough. And like, even in recognizing that you don't know the results.
So the irony here actually is that when you adopt the Barakah mindset, you end up working harder at your secular job than if you only had a dunya mindset.
Yeah, and because also the accountability, like, you're not accountable to your boss anymore. Literally, you're thinking, okay, even the small stuff, the small stuff, am I doing this properly? Am I doing this? Ihsan, excellence. This is where ihsan comes in, where you become so conscious and so aware and so mindful that honestly, you are like the role model employee, really, the role model, person that everyone wants. And but because you're not part of the game. You're not plugged into that game. When you have to play, you play the politics game. Like, I'm not even, that's not even on my mind. It's almost like when you have a high performer in your work who they love their job. They don't care all the politics happen in the background. They just do their job because they love their job. But now for you infusing spirituality, I mean, literally, whether it's salah, whether it's fasting, whether it's dua. I mean, can you imagine doing dua for a project at work? Like,
that's the only way I've gotten through projects is making dua at work, because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
I mean, just doing that and recognizing it's coming from Allah Ta'ala. So part of it's your own spiritual development and recognize that the barakah comes with it. But part of it as well is being aware that, it's a different set of law. You are operating a different paradigm. Don't try to apply. If you apply barakah paradigm stuff in dunya paradigm, you'll struggle, and vice versa. So just think of it, this is a different paradigm, and I'm operating from that paradigm. That's my primary paradigm. And yes, and I'll turn up on time. I'll meet deadlines. I'll go to meetings. I'll be smart about building coalitions with people. I will go through that change program that for the 5th time, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm operating from that barakah paradigm.
All right, so I know we're getting close on time here. This was a great conversation, Jazakallah khair. Any final comments, final thoughts on this topic that we didn't get to dive into?
Yeah, I think I'm inviting everyone to really leading with their thoughts. I mean, this is not a one person, two person sort of research. Really, we need all of us to kind of start seeing and making those connections between what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, in the Sunnah, and in the Seerah, and our personal and professional lives, and make those connections in a practical way, and seeing and start noticing the barakah. And if you have a barakah story in your life that you want to share, please do share with us, or on the platform, on the social media, or anywhere you can reach out to us. And also, if you really feel like this is an area you want to learn more about, check out, we've started a whole academy called Barakah Academy, which is basically a platform where you're kind of researching this idea of spirituality and personal and professional development, and trying to do it almost in a community perspective. It's not just, again, it's not about me teaching stuff. It's about all right, let's figure this out. For example, we do have these monthly calls where last week we talked about purification of the heart and professional development, or what is the link between remembering death and professional development, or what is the link between salah and personal development. Like, really starting to ask those questions and make those connections so that it becomes meaningful in our lives. So invite everyone to join that and be part of the inshallah.
All right, inshallah. Okay, I'll link everything up in the show notes. Reach out in the social media and all that good stuff, and we'll catch you all in the next episode.
Exactly.
All right. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts or Google Play or whatever podcast player you use. And please rate and review the podcast. As always, if you share it with a friend, that's much appreciated. You can check the show notes for all the details and links. See you in the next episode.